Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it is the 6th of July, 2023. I hope everybody's doing alrighty out there. Little drowsy. Let me just fix this a little bit. But that'll probably, go away as time goes by. So by the time we end the show, I should be completely wide awake and fully there. So I hope everybody's doing well. I don't really have much really to talk about, so we'll probably just dive into questions pretty early today. However, finally, after honestly a month and a half of struggle, I got a chance to make some real progress on these major Mace Mattingly stuff. So that'll be for Monday's show, but I've just been bashing my head against the wall trying to get things working and actually got a lot of progress done. So I've got the 4 guys in their suits. I took the mercury textures and took the silver reflective off and gave them different colors, and I've got good faces, I think, so we'll see. So we'll have that on Monday. Other than that, just 2 little things that were kind of on my mind. One of them is this Russian coup that had my wife really very, very upset, thinking that that there was going to be a civil war and that Moscow was going to soon be in flames, which lasted for 30 hours or something like that. At which point it just kind of stopped. I don't know what to do about that or what to say about that. It doesn't. It just continues to show me that no matter how much anybody thinks they know about what goes on inside Russia, nobody really knows what's going on inside Russia, and I don't think the people inside Russia know what's going on inside Russia, including Vlad himself. I did get to do the final notes on episode 1 of Empire of Terror, and I started on episode 2. The opening of episode 2 is episode 2 is called Bacillus, and it's about Lenin's trip from Switzerland to Petrograd in 1917 and how he traveled across Germany, who Russia was at war with, in a sealed train, and it turned out it was paid for by German high command intelligence. There's no question about all that stuff. Anyway, the whole opening was written. First 20 minutes, half an hour of this is about this train trip, and I saw the opening for episode 2, and it's just a blank screen, and then you just hear this locomotive just getting closer and closer and closer, and then it cuts to like an authentic train from right around that period, and it's just, and there's guys just shoveling coal into this thing, and then the switches are moving and on the rails, and it's just the most amazing piece of editing I've ever seen, ever. The editor's name is Luke. We had such problems on the Cold War, real problems on the Cold War. I had to do 900 notes on that. 900. But this thing is insane. It looks so good. Oh, hello, New Zealand. It's always a thrill. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for everybody for the kind words. And it is not something I've had an opportunity to experience too often. I certainly got that sense during the Apollo 11 series. But when you're looking at your own work, which you've written and wouldn't say exactly directed, but presented, so you were there for every frame of it. And I came out of there in March thinking, I think that looked really pretty good. I think that went well. I thought the scripts were good. But when you see it, and when you see what somebody with real talent can add to what you start with, it's a tremendous feeling. It really is. It's a tremendous, tremendous feeling. it just kind of blew me away. I wrote him a real note saying, I've been editor for 30 years now or something, and I did a lot of documentaries and stuff for History Channel and Discovery back when they were about history and discovering things. But I've never seen anybody do this kind of editing before. And the graphics, just the graphics are just, the entire post look is just phenomenal. Many times watching both of these episodes now, I found myself just having to stop myself and just say, I'm not really in this huge dungeon. I'm just standing in front of a really, really well-made flat. There's a moment in the first script, I didn't know how this was going to work either, but we had an excellent director. And in the first episode, I'm in the basement of the Lubyanka for the first, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or something. And then just on one shot, it just back to me on the, just like coverage, and then back to me, coverage, back to me, coverage, back to me, and then goes back to me. And I say, we have a lot of pictures over here. And I just walk off the set. And the camera pans, and I walk into the room that we were calling the map room, which is also a beautiful, practical set with, these guys had probably 200 photographs framed and ready to go of everybody that I mentioned in the script. So between episodes, we'd rearrange them on the wall, and whichever pictures we'd use for that particular episode. And the B-roll, for those of you unfamiliar with that term, the B-roll is, so if you're editing a show, the A-roll is your content. That'd be me. I'd be the A-roll. I'd be the guy who's telling the story and I'm on camera. B-roll is stuff that you use to cut away with or to accent the story. And when I got there to shoot the thing, I got there late in the afternoon of the day before I was supposed to start. Got to the set, took a look at the set, couldn't believe it, and then there was this. They were shooting B-roll in the map room. And I was looking at it on the monitors in the control room. I just couldn't believe it. There's this really excellent set. Looks like a Russian study, and it's just all this beautiful furniture and all these pictures. And there's a slow dolly in, and here's a picture of Trotsky in a golden frame on a tripod with the background and the lights, and just a slow push in, and fantastic. Andrew DeLay asks, is Jeremy going to give We Belittle members a deal on seeing the new series? I went out to Nashville 3 weeks ago, to ask about 4 things, and that was the first one on my list, and I did not get an answer. That doesn't mean a no or a yes, but I am going to continue to fight really hard for that. I asked him for a certain number of memberships for a certain amount of time. He didn't say yes, didn't say no either, but it was a strange trip. However, whatever, I am just determined to just keep fighting until I get something, So, I was told when we shot this that this thing would be premiering at the end of the summer. I saw their production schedule in terms of delivery dates. It's actually going to premiere in November, which I'm a little disappointed about. However, when this thing I am going to continue to push for this really, really hard, and then I am going to whatever we get, I'm going to time for the release of Empire of Terror. So BillWhittle.com members and hopefully a few extras, so we can bring in some new members. I'm hoping to get. Well, I won't tell you the numbers of how long I was hoping to get, but because I don't know whether it's been approved. I don't know whether any of it's been approved. I might say no to all of it. But certainly I wanted Daily Wire Plus memberships for a certain number of people for a certain length of time. And especially due to the fact that so much of this stuff has taken up so much of my time that it's really cost me in terms of firewalls and moving back to America and all this other stuff, and that's not fair to the members. And I just went in there and made the case that that the membership deserved this. Cody Fett with a super chat says, no offense, Bill, but a year-long trial membership is a bit much. The industry standard is a month for trial accounts, 3 at the max. Well, the one thing I've learned about dealing with Daily Wire is you had better go in asking high, because they're not gonna say, well, here, you know what, we'll just add this. You're just gonna, I just decided to ask for as much as I thought I could get away with, and then we'll see. But even a month, again, I don't have it yet. I continue to fight for it. I've been fighting for it for months now, for over a year. However, that is my hope, and also it's good for them. I mean, there's nobody, I don't think, that's a member of my audience that hasn't heard of Daily Wire or Daily Wire Plus. And so my feeling, my pitch was, look, here's potential. You're going to convert a lot of these free memberships once people see the cornucopia of wonders that are behind the locked door here. But in any event, it seems like I really owe it to these people, and stood with me for so long, and so I'm going to just keep going. He was in the middle of shooting a movie, and it was just not a great time for that kind of thing. I'm starting on the Frank Luke thing, and that's something I was real excited about, and we'll see how that goes. So one little step at a time. However, if when I say when time comes for this thing to be released, when I say I'm going to fight for it harder, I'm going to fight for it like hard, because this is not a lot to ask for, especially considering the quality of the work that they got and have gotten over 4 different series now, and this thing's in a league of its own. The producer of the Empire series said it's like a documentary stumbled onto a feature film set, and I just thought, wow, that's incredible. And like I said, I was just watching this thing, and again, I just finally that's not that long corridor behind me. Those rows and rows of cells that don't actually exist there. They're not there. You can't tell. You cannot tell what the boundary is. Purple Union says he loves the 2001 picture in the background. Thank you. There's actually those 5 pictures, Bowman, and then there's the Pan Am Clipper going to the station, and there's one of the station head on, and then I think the landing on the moon pad and all the rest of it. Anyway, so there's that. But this thing is off the hook. It's just incredible, and I'm very, very proud of it. It's especially after this last experience, which was not fun. But to sit there and see this stuff and just be like just kind of watching your own stuff, that you're like, whoa, wow, really? So in any event, there's that. I'm monitoring both streams. I monitor both streams, and I produce a stream that goes on in my head. I'm multitasking. So it's freaking marvelous, and I think like the Apollo series, I think it's going to be around for a while. I showed it to Natasha. She loved the look of it and everything, and I showed her the first half of the second episode, and she started talking about all the things that she enjoyed about the Soviet Union when she was a little girl. Things like, they had these free camps, and you walk into any clinic anywhere, and if you go to college for free, and if you wanted to be a scientist, you had the grades. The state would send you off to be a scientist or send you off to be a ballerina, and all the benefits of this. And I realized, well, first of all, there's a lot about that has some truth to it. But also a lot of it has to do with just this sort of feeling of, just kind of shame, I guess, when you hear about all of these murders that went on in her country. This is her country now. It's hard to deal with it. I had a feeling that was going to be coming up somewhere. Is it just anyway? So she was saying, you should be fair and say that there were some good things there too. And my response to that was, honey, they're calling for socialism in every campus of America. Everybody in America, every young kid has been told, hey, you get paid a living wage, you get, your apartment is free, and your food is free, and your health care is free, and all of this stuff, and they think it's a swell idea. Nobody's heard of the price. That's the thing that nobody's heard about, and I don't want to present a balanced picture. It's not my job to present a balanced picture. I explained if I'm prosecuting a guy who's murdered 15 children, I'm not obligated to talk about all the good things he did during the course of his life. I'm obligated to make the case of the crime, and the balance of it in terms of being fair is not about being fair to whatever good things may have happened in terms of things like walk into a clinic and so on, and the medicine. I have a Russian doctor because I was just so impressed by the fact that he wasn't, doing what most American doctors have been forced to do, which is see, 400 patients a day or whatever the case may be. Ben Adams for a super chat says the What We Saw series was awesome. Thank you. Both the Apollo and the Cold War thing. And one of the things, and this is just sheer vanity as well, but it's also kind of a significant aspect of it. So in the Apollo series, I was kind of in period, the hair kind of slicked back a little bit, and the 60s tie, and then on the Cold War, they did a great job with the wardrobe. I had a different, kind of 60s outfit for each one of the 13 episodes. I wasn't crazy about the makeup or the lighting or the hair. I just kind of looked mummified, I thought. But on this one, I've got the Malibu Einstein hair going, and I've got this just a black low-cut suit with a white shirt, open collar, and a blood red satin pocket square because it needed a little bit of color, and the reason we did that was I said from the beginning of this, when it was even before we were talking about shooting it, I said in the case of Apollo in the Cold War, I could look like I was part of the environment. In the Apollo thing, I looked like I was a guy from the 60s, and it worked. And the same thing for the Cold War. But on this one, I said I have absolutely have to look like I have parachuted into this place. I cannot for a second look like I'm a part of this, in the way that I looked like I was a part of the Apollo program, or a part like the Cold War thing was. The set was great, you got the scotch and the reel-to-reel recorder and the old TV and all that other stuff. So that worked really well. But in this case, I said I cannot look anything like a part of this. I have to look like the voice of justice. It's like the voice of American justice, and I got to look like 2023, and I've got to look out of place here. That's the term I was looking for. I really, really need to be out of place here. I don't want to be associated with this. I am prosecuting this crime. That's what I'm doing. And the balance, I explained to Natasha, the fairness and the balance is that again and again and again, I keep making the case that this was not what the Russian people did, it's what was done to them. This was what was done to them. There has been, appropriately enough, obviously, a racially, human racially burned into our conscious and subconscious the effects of the Nazis and the death camps in Dachau and Auschwitz and Treblinka and all the rest. We're all aware of that. Nobody's aware of Kolyma or the little triplex of execution spots that are each of, in the first episode I say, if you mark the center of Moscow, it looks like a bullseye. It's got a big circle. It's actually got a series of concentric circles, probably make it easier for Slim Pickens to hit if the radar goes out on the bomb run. But right in the center is the Kremlin. Right in the center, outside of the Kremlin, but is Red Square, and in Red Square is Lenin's tomb, and in the center of Lenin's tomb is Lenin's forehead. And so the first episode is if you walk 1,562 feet north-northeast, you'll come to this building where they murdered 100,000 people. There's a toy store across the street. And then you come out of this building, and you turn right on this street. You walk about 5 minutes. It's 4/10 of a mile, and you'll see this unremarkable gate still there. 13,000 people shot in that courtyard just behind that gate. And if you want to go in the other direction, you can go down here to this building called the shooting, that the Russians called the shooting house, with 36,000 people murdered in this building that's going to be a perfume store, that kind of thing. So my fairness was to not demonize the Russian people for this. It was to demonize the obviously many of them Russian, some of them Polish, and some of them not, but most of them Russian. But these are people who were the thing that is most striking about the Empire of Terror. And the thing that kept surprising me when I was writing it, I kept saying, well, let's get to Stalin, let's get to Stalin. It's like, no, I'm staying here. This is where it all happened, all with Lenin and all of this stuff. It's amazing how un-Russian Lenin was. He spent the previous 17 years in exile in Zurich and Munich, or Berlin at least, certainly, and London and other places, drinking tea and talking to professional revolutionaries and writing agitation. He hadn't been in Russia for 17 years. He had nothing but contempt for the Russian people and the Russian peasants, and he said so many times. And I guess since I'm on a roll on this now, I'm not aware of any other historian who has either made this realization or at least voiced it. Now, that doesn't mean it's not the case. I've just never heard it before, and I find it to be so unbelievably important that when I realized what had happened, I actually was like, my God, man, you may have actually hit on something like really, really, really important here. So since I didn't have a warm-up for tonight, now turns out now I do. So Lenin reads Marx when he's a boy, and he talks about a teenager. He talks about falling in love with him, like romantically in love with Marxism and the whole idea of Marxism. And so the reason Lenin's not in Russia for those 17 years is he's working to be a communist agitator for Marxism. The reason he's not in Russia is because he and all the rest of the big brains didn't think that communism was going to come to Russia. In fact, it was impossible for communism to come to Russia. The reason that Lenin and so many of these other intellectuals and so many of these intellectuals who are teaching colleges in America today, that's the last bastion of Leninism and communism, is here in America on college campuses. But they all took Marx as not as philosophy but as science. Marx said it's a historical inevitability, and this is constantly why you'd hear the communists saying, like, we are on the wrong side of history, and you'll end up in the dustbin of history, and all. This is science. It's not economics. It's not politics. It's science. And so here I am writing this thing about the Russian secret police, and I just keep coming back to the revolution and coming back to how these ideas were brought into Russia. Nicholas II and the regime of the Tsars was a brutal autocratic regime, but anybody who went to prison under both of those systems said that just incomparably. If you had experienced the communist prison system or torture system, you would pray that you had been arrested by the Tsar and his police. So anyway, here's the point. So Lenin is in Zurich, and then the Tsar abdicates, and there's chaos in the capital of Petrograd, which had been renamed by Nicholas II to boost morale. Nicholas II had gone to the front to lead the troops in person. Catastrophic mistake. I said Nicholas II, I wrote, had a supernatural ability to make the wrong decision. But there's Lenin in Switzerland, and all of a sudden the Tsar's gone, and there's turmoil in Russia. Power's lying on the ground. He's understandably enough, although I don't often feel any sympathy or connection with Lenin, he had to get back there. So connections were made, and the Germans, if you look at the map, you can't get from Switzerland to St. Petersburg, Petrograd, without going right across Germany, at least not without going around the wide way. And Lenin didn't want to come in by boat. He was afraid of U-boats, so he was afraid of a lot of things. So he's on this train. Anyway, here's the point. He's on the train. He's got about a week or 2 weeks. Ended up taking 2 weeks to get there. And the entire time he's traveling from Zurich to the northern part of the peninsula, he has to disembark and take a boat across the Gulf of Finland. He's got 2 weeks there, and he's working on something that came to be known as his April theses. And Lenin's April theses were enshrined in Marxist doctrine. It's like, you know, it's like a chapter of the gospel. You know, Leninism is essentially the April theses. And I thought, okay, so he's working on the April theses and so on, and I'd known about this, and I just thought, okay. And then it just like a thunderbolt hit me that what he was doing on that train for those 2 weeks and what he was writing in his April theses, he was inverting Marxism, not just modifying it. He was inverting it in order for him to take power. Marx said that revolution, communism, will come when the proletariat, that'd be factory workers, when the factory workers finally rise up against their oppressors, take over the means of production, and start producing all of these goods and services for the people. That's the scientific theory. You have the proletariat arises, you banish the bourgeoisie or kill them, and then the workers' paradise will arrive where the workers will take over everything, and once the workers are controlling everything, the entire idea of a state will wither away. And this is Marxism, and this is what Lenin, it was his religion. He openly called it his religion. Okay, so far so good. So what are the April theses? Well, the April theses are him changing Marx completely upside down. He's not a Marxist anymore. He's an anti-Marxist. He is trying to make the case that he's going to bring this workers' revolution, the dictatorship of the proletariat, to a country that didn't have a proletariat. There were 90 million peasants and 1 million factory workers. There was no proletariat in Russia. None. So the scientific theory that Marx is, this is the inevitability of, Lenin's looking at this, he says, how do I get power in this place? How do I bring communism to a place where communism is impossible according to the person who wrote communism? How do I do it? And he basically had to find a way to justify his taking power. So he talked about the dictatorship of the proletariat. And when he got off the train, he said, all power to the Soviets. But the thing he did in the April theses was basically say, yeah, Marx was wrong about this. This business about having to have an industrialized society before communism comes, we'll just pretend he didn't say that. Because even though Russia doesn't have a proletariat, you see, if you have, and the peasants, which is Russia, which was the population, and the peasants are too stupid and too superstitious and too religious, and they don't have class consciousness, so none of the conditions for communism are right. However, a small band of professional revolutionaries could bring about the Marxist revolution, and then once the revolution occurred, then they would make their own proletariat. They would build the church from the top down. They'd start with the top of the steeple and then build the foundation down from there. This arch student and disciple of Marxism inverted Marxism in 10 days so that he could get off of the train and assume power. Don't have a proletariat here? No problem. That's right. Don't worry about that. Got that covered. You see, what we can do is we can have these professional revolutionaries, and that's exactly what he did, by the way. Once he had the wheels, the levers of power, which were just lying on the street there, anybody could have picked them up. Then he immediately started doing what he'd always planned to do, which is starve the peasants, take away their power, promise them land, give them land from the bourgeoisie, get your revolution. Once the revolution's secured, take the land back from the peasants, starve them into submission, kill the ones who are putting up the biggest fight, but mostly starve them so that these 90 million peasants and 1 million proletarians, you starve the peasants so that they have no choice but to move to the cities and become factory workers, otherwise they starve to death. That's how you make a proletarian class, is you starve the peasants and force them into the cities. Then if you have to kill 10, 20, 30 million people, well, that's you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? So this is the thing that I just simply couldn't believe, was that this guy, in order to gain power and bring about the Marxist revolution and the dictatorship of the proletariat, had to not only ignore Marx, he had to turn Marx upside down. And he did. And he pulled it off. And that's what he had in common with Hitler. Neither one of these guys were particularly deep thinkers, or they weren't just megalomaniacal, they were monomaniacal. The reason Hitler and Lenin came to power was because of their single-mindedness. There is nothing that either one of those two men did not a breath that they took from the time they were in their 20s to the time they died. There was not a breath that they took where they weren't breathing revolution. That's all they were about. Hitler never, ever, ever, ever talked about hunting, sports, the weather, nothing. It was all about power. Same for Lenin. All about power. All about power. That monomaniacal will. And that you have to give to these two mass murderers. You got to give them that. Will. Just unshakable will. And in the case of both of them, everybody loves to compare Stalin to Hitler, but Lenin makes it's a much better match, because neither one of them cared the slightest about what it would take to get to power. They didn't care if it killed people. They certainly didn't care if it seemed to be hypocritical and indeed go against their own principles. Didn't matter. They just had to get in power. And once they got into power, then they would start killing people to make sure that they stayed in power. That simple. Eric Blake says, did that stop the old Grinch? Of course not. He simply said, if I can't find a proletariat, I'll make one instead. That's it. He went to launch the dictatorship of the proletariat when there was no proletariat. All this and much, much more in the Empire of Terror, which will be coming in November, and which I'm extraordinarily proud of, and have been just over the moon delighted with in terms of the quality of the production. I had a couple people say that the Apollo series was the best, not only the best space documentary they ever saw, but the best documentary they ever saw. I was very, very flattered about that, and I think there's something to this. But this is going to be the best documentary I've ever seen, and there's that. Dave Big Booty says, when's that Fox Business Moon show going to air? I don't know. I'm hoping. I heard like August. However, I have not heard back from Jimmy. although I haven't contacted him either. So I'll let you know when that's about ready to go. In the Twitch stream, High Speed says, have you discussed this with Jordan Peterson? He's very knowledgeable in this area you're commenting on. Jordan Peterson is the only person I've ever heard talk about this, consistently work this into modern day politics. And among the many discussions I had in Nashville when I was there 3 weeks ago, one or two of them with the marketing people were to say, look, when this thing is ready to go, I need to do at least 1 2-hour session with Jordan Peterson. Ideally, it'd be nice if we could talk for 20, 30 minutes about each episode, because he's the only person out there who's talking about what this is. What this is. And for those of you who keep talking, Daily Wire and stuff, I should mention that it's available on Apple Podcasts. I'm not sure about SoundCloud, certainly on Apple Podcasts. Apollo 11, The Cold War, America's Forgotten Heroes, and the Empire of Terror will all be on podcasts, so you don't have to pay the membership to see it. But in this particular case, this one's going to be worth seeing. So I'm going to try and see if I can get the marketing person to give me a chance to post, the first 2-3 minutes maybe privately for the members only on a private link, so that just so they can see it. But it is it's just really, really good. And there is another history series that I have been contracted for, the to be announced series. We haven't got that discussed yet or down yet. I think I would like to do the War in the Pacific, frankly. The Pacific documentary, the companion to Band of Brothers, was really the story of the Marine Corps. But you can't tell the story of the Pacific without the Marine Corps. But I'd like to talk about. I think if I was going to do the next series, the one I really, really my heart would be in would be to do the U.S. Navy in the Pacific War, because people know about Pearl Harbor. Young people don't know much about anything. It's not their fault being educated by Leninists. But most people know about Pearl Harbor. A few people know about the Doolittle Raid and Iwo Jima. And, there's just so much there. The naval engagements on Guadalcanal alone, all of the, I think there were 6 or 7 carrier battles between the two navies. The Battle of the Philippine Sea with the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Taffy 3 is the high point of any story. That's my life's goal is to tell Taffy 3. Midway, yes, people know about Midway, exactly. But Midway was Midway. But Midway was 4 Japanese carriers against 3 American carriers. By the time you get to the Battle of the Philippine Sea, you're talking about 7 versus 12 or something along those lines. It's always, to me, I always look at history, from a storytelling point of view. Because I'm not really a historian so much as a storyteller. I'm an amateur historian. I take the facts very seriously, and I do a lot of research on these things. But for me, the thing I liked about Apollo and Cold War and America's Forgotten Heroes and Empire of Terror is you've got, in many cases, years. In all of those cases, you've got years. And in the case of the Cold War, you've got nearly 80 years. Wow. Just looked up and saw Orange Peel's 2010 says, my uncle disappeared in the Pacific War in a naval test aircraft. See, that's the kind of story I'm interested in. In the battle of it's those human moments, right? And and the difference between Ray Spruance and Bill Halsey. And in the Battle of Philippine Sea, Spruance, the U.S. Navy now is really beginning to hit its stride now. So, and leading up to the capture of the Marianas, which would be Saipan, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. So there's the Japanese fleet. Spruance's orders are to cover the invasion. Cover the invasion. This invasion of the Marianas has to happen. And the Japanese are launching carrier attacks, and they're launching land attacks, and we shoot 600 some Japanese planes out of the sky in one day for a loss of 60 American planes. The Great Marianas Turkey shoot, and the Japanese fleet's retreating, and guys like Bill Halsey and other people are just steam coming out of their ears. They're screaming at Spruance to go after him and finish him off. And Spruance is saying, "No, I'm not gonna draw my carriers off. My job is to protect the landing. That's my mission. Is to make sure the invasion of these islands succeeds. And I'm not going to go chasing those guys and have them outflank me or lose this operation. No." And Spruance was right, because a year later, Halsey would take the bait, and that's what caused the Taffy 3 adventure. But anyway, it's talking about the human story. So the reason I want to tell the Pacific War is I want to tell stories like this. During that battle, as the Japanese were retreating, they'd already they'd shot down 600 Japanese planes. What the Americans didn't realize, certainly Halsey didn't realize, but the Great Marianas Turkey shoot that battle. I think we sank maybe one or two of their carriers, but that's not what the battle was about. That was the end of the Japanese carrier-based. That was the end of Japanese carriers, not because we sank them, but because we shot down every one of their pilots, killed virtually all of their pilots. They could build airplanes, not as fast as we could, obviously, but they could build more airplanes, but they couldn't train up any more pilots. And after the Great Marianas Turkey shoot, it doesn't matter if they sail away with 5 carrier decks or 7 or 20. They don't have pilots anymore. An aircraft carrier without airplanes is useless. And Halsey didn't realize that. So here's the story. It's late in the day. The Japanese carriers are retreating. Spruance is willing to take another shot at another attack. It's getting late. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. These guys are at maximum range of the airplanes that he's going to send up. So Spruance is trying to decide whether or not to do this raid, and he decides he's going to do it. But he knows that this raid means that if these guys go off and do this attack, sunset attack on the Japanese carriers, on the Japanese fleet, then they're going to have to fly home in the dark. And landing in the dark on an aircraft carrier today with a carrier instrument landing system and you get a little lighted, it's terrifying. But landing at night is especially terrifying. And the only real threat to the carriers by this point, certainly at this time in the battle, he knows he's beaten the Japanese Naval Air Force. He knows he's beaten the Japanese carriers. He knows they're running away. There's only one threat now to him, and that is Japanese submarines. That is the only thing that's a real genuine threat out there. So Spruance launches this strike. The American planes go out there. They strike these Japanese fleet. They start coming back home. They're watching their fuel gauges for like 2 hours. They're all flying at engines as lean as they can get it. They're all flying at their best distance altitude, at their best distance airspeed, which is slow. Crawling home, and even it's not like they're going to use GPS. Even if they get into the general area, how are they going to land? The fleet's blacked out because of submarines. You can't just do that. So Spruance, this is the kind of story I just love it. I love it because I can see it. So you've got hundreds of American pilots coming back, single-seat guys in fighters and 3 guys in Avengers and 2 in the dive bombers. You've got hundreds of American sailors, naval aviators, heading back into the east, into the darkness, hoping to get close enough to the general vicinity of the carriers so that when they run out of fuel and ditch, they've got a chance of being picked up the next day. And Spruance is running his whole fleet blacked out like they're always blacked out. The sub-threat is a real threat. The Japanese know we're there because we've just fought this gigantic battle. And Spruance thinks it over, and he sends out this order to the entire fleet, and he says, turn on every light you got. Everything. Turn on everything you've got. He had searchlights on the decks of these carriers scanning the skies. Every single plane, every single ship was lit up to the maximum. They were firing rockets and flares. They were risking the sub-attack so that their guys would have a place to come home. And these pilots coming back to this, expecting to ditch in the dark, come back and see this light show. It's like Vegas down there. And that just took so much guts, moral courage, on the part of Spruance. Moral courage. Single Japanese sub sank a number of carriers. Hornet was sunk by one submarine shortly after it was commissioned. One of our subs sank. The largest ship ever sunk by a submarine was going to be one of the Yamato class battleships, and they converted it into an aircraft carrier. I want to say Zuihu, but I'm not 100% sure about that. This is the biggest aircraft carrier ever prior to our super carriers, and an American sub sank that. So this is the trick. This is the only way you can lose the war now. Shinano, thank you. It's the only way you can lose the war. This battle now is have a sub attack. It's over. You've won. And he turns on all the lights they have. And these are the stories that blow my mind. If you tell that story correctly, and I'm Sad Wings. It's the new series. It's called An Empire of Terror. It's slated to release in early November. But if you tell that story from the point of view of a pilot, somebody who's been a pilot, especially somebody who's been a glider pilot, I think it was within my first 10 solos ever, certainly in my first 10, I flew for 7 hours and went 186 miles without an engine in the Mojave Desert in the summertime, where there's so much lift, you throw a rock in the air and it just keeps going up. So I was flying this triangular course. I went around it 3 times. Crystal out to here, like Cal City or something, and down to Palmdale and around. And so when the lift is good, you're going up, everything's great. And you're always constantly thinking about where you're going to land because you don't have an engine on this particular aircraft you're flying. But when you are out there, and I'll never forget this, I was on one of these legs and I was out there as far away from the field as I've been, and I just could not find any lift there. I just couldn't find it. And, you just get lower and lower and lower, and you're just flying along, just waiting for that little nudge, something, to tell you can find some rising air. During that flight, I'd found lift that was 14 knots of lift. I was just going straight up at, 20 miles an hour. A lot of that was really good, but when I was as far away as I'd been, I could not find any lift, and then suddenly I found just enough. Just enough. And I remember thinking to myself, a half a knot of lift when you're far from home is a much better feeling than 20 knots of lift when you're not. And I just kind of clawed my way back into the desert and then found some real lift, but there was, look, it's not the end of the world. If you're a glider pilot, you're prepared to land on fields anywhere. I didn't want to do that, though. I kind of wanted to bring the airplane back to the place where I took off from, on account of me being, on my 8th flight or something in my solo flight. And so I have a sense of what those guys felt like. That sense of just, it's not panic. It's actually the opposite of panic. You've got, panic is like, oh my God. Panic is when the engine quits. This was more like, you've got hour to think about this, an hour. You're just constantly recalculating how much, what's the L over D? How far can I glide? For every foot I drop, how far can I go forward? Doing the math. Do I have enough altitude to get back? And for an hour, you're just sweating bullets out there, just praying for this refueling in the air. And then when you get it, and when you get it, there's like some hope here, a little hope. And then it just keeps continuing, and then you begin to think, my God, maybe there is a chance I can make it. And then after time, it's like, I got a 50-50 chance of getting home now. And after that, it's like, I think we're actually going to make it. And then, yeah, I'm in range. It's, Eric said, not so much terror, panic as dread. Dread is the word. It's just constant dread, and you get to live with it for a long time, because it's not like you're getting shot at. It's just that you're running out of fuel. I was running out. My fuel was rising air. My thermals was my fuel in gliders, and I was running out of fuel. And then I found some. So if you can capture that feeling and put the audience into the mind of these guys who are 20 years old, by the way, right? These are not, I got to stop saying right, who are 20 years old. This is not Sully out there. These are kids who had to grow up real fast, and their entire young lives are, ahead of them. Now, we had to ditch a lot of those airplanes, and most of the planes that got back, that ditched, we picked up the pilots on. We picked up pilots the next day, all the way down the trail towards where the Japanese fleet was. We were picking up guys that ran out of fuel. And so we got most of our pilots back. We didn't get all of them back. They had, Spruance had also sent the order out to these pilots and said, don't worry about what carrier you're from. Just land on any deck you can get to. If you've got enough fuel to take one of the carriers that are a little deeper into the formation, do that so that your buddies who are running on vapors, can land. But we're not going to be pissy about this now. Just come home. What a great moment. What an amazing guy Ray Spruance was. And nobody knows about Ray Spruance. And I'm very fortunate to have visited an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, and I was especially happy that it was DDG-111, which was the USS Spruance. So there you go. That's one tiny little story out of the hundreds of little stories like this that nobody knows about, that actually happened. Hollywood doesn't know how to make any movies anymore. And they're out of franchises to destroy. So somebody's got to do this. And the thing that I don't understand is, how do you not tell a story that actually happened? It doesn't require an imagination. You just read what happened. The story's been written. Those guys wrote the screenplay. The screenplay is sitting there on the ground. It's in 15 different books if you go looking for them. And that is one story out of hundreds in this Pacific War with the U.S. Navy, and nobody tells it. And the Doolittle raid, the last time that was talked about was 60 seconds over Tokyo, which was what, 1940. It might have been during the war, actually. Come to think of it, Midway's been made a couple times. They made Midway, 2, 3, 4 years ago. And I had no desire to see that, and I finally did. And I talked to Steve Skinner, who's the guy who wrote the book about Frank Luke, and we were talking about he hadn't signed the way he signed the book rights. He has also the life rights for Frank Lucas. So if we could get Steve Skinner, meaning Daily Wire, to agree to option his book as source material, that's where I got most of my stuff about Frank Luke. I'm switching gears here for a moment just to tell you how this thing works. So I talked to him for, I was just trying to pitch the thing, so I was really briefed on the pitch. I wanted him to know that I really, really understood this and I wanted to do this right. So I gave him an hour-long pitch, and the guys from Daily Wire, came in a little late on the conversation. After about 10, 15 minutes, they said, okay, well, you guys seem to be getting along okay. We'll just, because this is just like two computers and just modems talking to each other. But Steve Skinner and I knew we were on the same page when we were talking about this Frank Luke story, and I said something or other, and Steve said, look, I don't want to make flyboys, right? And I said, oh man, I can't believe you said that. Yes, exactly. That's going to be our shorthand from now on. Anytime we talk about something that is cheap or easy or doesn't belong there, we're just going to say flyboys. We're not making flyboys. For those of you unfamiliar with flyboys, undoubtedly you want to rush out and see it. Flyboys was it came out 2005 or 6, somewhere in that general ballpark, maybe a little later, about World War I pilots. There was no story there. The story that was there was completely overhyped, but the worst part about Flyboys was it was done with CGI and had endless numbers of shots where the plane would come and you would go like between the wires of the wing, and as the CG camera flies between the CG wires and CG wings of the CG airplane, they put in a little CG camera shake to convince you that you really did go through the wires of this airplane. It was absurd. It was ridiculous. It was a movie that tried to make. It wasn't about anyone or anything. It was completely fictional. You didn't give a damn about any of the characters. And so all you got are these CG effects that are so over the top that nobody believes it. You might as well be watching, Star Wars. And I mean like prequel Star Wars. Okay. All right. So he's attacking the donut ship. Okay. Wow. That's exciting. So we didn't want to make Flyboys, and that's what Midway was. Midway was Flyboys. It was a story that had so much inherent drama in it that these morons had to add what they thought was drama because they thought that would make it more exciting. So when you see these guys doing the dive bombing runs on the carriers and the Japanese carriers, there was there was anti-aircraft fire up there. But the Japanese were never as good as anti-aircraft fire as we were, and this was early in the war. But on Flyboys, these guys are flying. It's like they're flying down a factory chimney. Just nothing but explosions. Just nothing but explosions everywhere. And I guess they thought that'd make it more dramatic. And so they actually did this. I swear to God they did. They had this guy make a dive bombing attack on a Japanese carrier, the real guy, the name of the real guy. And he's going in lower, and he's diving, and he's supposed to release the bomb, or supposed to pull out, let's say, at 1,800 feet, whatever, okay? And when these guys, so dive bombing is when you take the plane, and the plane provides the guidance for the bomb. The plane is aiming the bomb, and when it releases the bomb, it's not like the bomb falls and has a chance to hit. The bomb is going to follow the same trajectory as the plane, so you line up the trajectory, steep dive angle, 80-degree dive angle. You get the airplane nose pointed where you want it, and then you just basically release the bomb, and essentially the two just separate. The bomb just keeps going down, and ideally it hits the target. So once again, they're doing things like, 3,000 feet, and altimeter's running down, and the guy's got this look. And his back says 2,000 feet, and meanwhile outside it's like explosion, the fireworks factory. 1,800 feet, that's the pull-out point, and he's got the steely-eyed look, he's a big meatball on the deck of the carrier. He's getting bigger and bigger. 1,600 feet, and oh wow, what guts, 1,400, something along these lines, right? releases this thing, pulls this plane into this high G pullout. And as he pulls out, this is in the Midway movie, as this dive bomber pulls out of the dive, you see the bomb hit the carrier and blow up. And as the dive bomber pulls out of the dive, it is so low that, and it's got a little bit of a bank angle, it is so low that it brushes a wingtip through the water. Just it brushes a wingtip through the water, as planes are wont to do. You know. The second that wingtip touches the water, that plane just cartwheels into the water. You don't just get to dip a wing into a substance that's 600 times denser than air and just have it just, now just dipped a wing in the water. Wow, that was close. I bet that was dramatic, huh? He got so close that he actually dipped his wing into the water. Why? Bart's Treasure said plane would crash because physics, with 9 or 10 exclamation points, which I don't think is enough. Does this have anything to do with James Bradley's books, Flyboys? I didn't read the book. I'm just talking about the Flyboys movie. Flyboys and Midways were both the same kind of movie where there was a story with no story, cliches masquerading as drama, and actual historical events that are so inherently dramatic that any attempt to heighten them is not only bad storytelling, it's an insult. It's an insult to reality. I just couldn't watch it, and the movie failed. And I think the reason the movie failed is because it was too spectacular. Nobody believed it. Nobody believed it. I saw another example of this, which wasn't nearly as offensive. What's it called? I'm not going to go to trouble looking it up. It's a recent movie, came out within the last couple months. Was it Dedication? Devotion? Was it Devotion? Another true story about one of the first black American aviators. He's flying the Korean War. He's got a white wingman, or white friend. They're flying Corsairs in Korea. True story. The black guy gets shot down on a ground attack run. He ditches in this field, and his white wingman, because it's got to be about black and white guys, can't be about Americans, can't be about naval aviators. No, we got to tell this story. At least it's not one of these divisive stories. Give him credit for that. So his friend decides that rather than flying home, he's going to land in this field because his buddy can't get out of his airplane. He's pinned in there and the plane's starting to burn. So he lands his Corsair, runs over, tries to get his friend out of the plane. He can't. And they send a rescue helicopter to pick him up, and they can't get him out of the plane, and he dies of either wounds or hypothermia or both or whatever. The wingman manages to get home, and he's awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And the actors were superb, but the story had just been run through the deflavorizer. And I don't know why it didn't appeal to me. I don't know why I felt so meh about it. It's an amazing story, true story, and the people who made the movie had good intentions. I think they overdid the CG a little bit, but nothing like on the level of Flyboys and Midway. And then I realized, you know what it is? You know why it's not working? This thing's not working? It's not working because I don't believe what's happening in the ready room, in the squadron room. And that's where all the story is. The stuff that happens in the air is not the story. In Devotion, both the crew's quarters, but especially that squadron briefing room, is so dark that you cannot imagine finding your way to a seat in there without an usher and a flashlight. It's nearly pitch black. And I guess that's because the director thought, no, we got to have this be really moody and really dark and stuff. It's so bloody dark that people can't see where they're going. And this is the thing that makes me nuts about about Hollywood, makes me nuts about them, is that they always have to do these things that just plain, maybe on some level, make some kind of sense on an artistic scale, but they just ruin the authenticity of it by trying to make it look so damn, so damn dramatic. It's like, well, you know what? It's not a dramatic place, you idiot. It's an extraordinarily boring place. It's got steel walls. There's no windows. There's big chairs. There's fluorescent lights. It's not about how the room looks. It's about what are they saying. And if you're going to make this thing so dark that I don't believe that they're even in this place, it's like, my God, man, can somebody get a light in here, please? So I didn't believe in the pilots. I thought the characters were corny, and I thought they were just doing too much of that kind of, tear in your eye kind of, I just didn't buy it. And if you don't buy the characters, then you're out of luck. So that's Flyboys Midway, and we're not doing that. And now, after I pitched his own story to him, Steve Skinner, I didn't hear from him for about almost 3 weeks. And I thought, well, I've done it now. I've somehow managed to convince him that the way to tell this Frank Luke story is to give him a talking dog. And then turned out he was away for a while, and he came back and said, no, it was really great talking to you. It's great talking to a writer who really gets it. And he said something that really shook me up, actually. It was a really interesting conversation. He said, if you're going to do the story of Frank Luke, any screen time that takes place in the air while he's flying is a waste of time. And I thought, well, now. He says, it's all about what happened in the squadron room. It's all about the dynamic between Luke, his commanding officer, the guy who is the commanding officer's commanding officer, Rickenbacker. What do we do with this insecure rebel? What do we do with him? That's the story. And I said, well, damn, man. Then it looks like we're not going to be making Flyboys after all. I mean, I got that from his book, but I was more interested in the sequential stuff because Frank Luke was the second one of America's Forgotten Heroes. However, when he said that, I realized, yes, I see. Absolutely. So I immediately said, okay, well, two things. First of all, I couldn't agree more. I completely get it. But on the other hand, this is a movie, and we're not making My Dinner with Frank Luke. So he's heroic because he deserves to be remembered because he did heroic things. Yes, well, he did heroic things because of his personality, and he really had no choice. And we were going back and forth on this. It's like, Steve, he has to have had choice. If he doesn't have choice, there's no agency. If he didn't make a decision, then he's just cattle going down to shoot in an abattoir. There's no heroism if he's not capable of deciding to do something. And we've got to show how horrific this was and how dangerous. And we just really started to get this thing synced up. So the thing that impressed me the most about that conversation and made me happiest was I knew we had a great true story, and that true story had not only a lot of tremendous adventure and visual excitement, but also that I knew that Frank Luke was a really interesting guy. The thing that put the hooks into me about Frank Luke was he used to be a bare-knuckle fighter in Phoenix copper mines. And when he decided he didn't want to do that anymore and he wanted to find a way to make a living, instead of opening up a bordello or a bar, that what you'd expect a bare-knuckle fighter to do, he opened up a dancing school for miners. He taught miners how to dance because the male-to-female ratio there was something like 30-1. And these grizzly old miners all wanted wives, and they wanted any competitive advantage they could get. So Frank Luke not only is dancing with these miners, Frank Luke wore a dress and danced with these miners. And nobody's going to give Frank Luke any grief because he's the bare knuckle champion of this mining community. And the second I read that, I thought, that's just so unlikely. It's just so unexpected. So this is going to be a hell of a great story. And the drama in the squadron buildings is going to be 90% of why this is not going to be Flyboys, and the other 10% of it is going to, well, the other 10% of it may or may not be out of my control. But obviously we'll have to use a significant amount of CG, but the CG has to be done the way that they did it in Maverick. The CG that they used in Maverick never ever looked like a shot that you couldn't get from a real camera. And that's the key to it. So they used real aircraft whenever they could, and when they couldn't use real aircraft, they used CG. But if they've got these jets coming down the valley or whatever, they didn't have the jets go one past one side, one to the other, and no, it's like tracking shot of these jets going through the valley, and it looked like real airplanes. And that's why it worked, because you couldn't get the camera into the miraculous places that you can with CG. So the whole thing has to be shot. The CG has to be shot so that there's not a shot in there that doesn't look like it was taken from another airplane shooting the action. Because your brain, that's Mr. Plinkett line, right? You may not have noticed it, but your brain did. So, anyway, I know this is kind of a Stratosphere Studios kind of talk, but it's also about history and you know where we're going. So I signed the contract, and so off we go. This will be nothing compared to the work on Empire of Terror. And for a guy who didn't have a warm-up topic, who never does, there's 90 minutes gone. So why don't we get to the questions? Frank Luke. And by the way, the book is called The Stand. It's by Stephen Skinner. Stephen Skinner, yes, it's signed. I'm done. I'm doing it. Stephen Skinner wrote about Frank Luke. I'm interested in him as a storyteller and as a pilot, but as a storyteller. What Stephen Skinner did was he wrote about it because to him it was a detective story. What happened on Frank Luke's final flight was one of those unsolved mysteries of World War I. And Stephen Skinner is a enthusiast. He hangs out with pilots and historians, and he went to 20 years worth of trouble, including going to France repeatedly, to absolutely conclusively show exactly where and when Frank Luke did what he did and solved that mystery of that final flight. He just went after it like a mystery writer. And I think that's awesome. But that's not the story I'm telling. He went to tell the story of The Stand because I'm back in this again, but I think it needs to be said too. Another reason I really like the Frank Luke idea, and the reason I wanted to do it as a series of historical movies for feature films for Daily Wire, was it was the easiest one to tell. I wanted to do John Paul Jones, and I wanted to do Taffy 3 and the Doolittle Raid and Booker T. Washington and all that, but this one would seem like the easiest one. So here's the reason he did The Stand. Yes, I know it's the same as Stephen King's title. This movie's not going to be called The Stand. So the legend of Frank Luke, and I heard this as a kid because I was in American schools, by the way, because even though they weren't, I don't think, nearly as good as British schools I went to school where they were still educating people here in America. And so I heard the story of Frank Luke when I was in elementary school, I think. And he was the balloon buster. He shot down balloons, and up until I started doing the research on him just a couple years ago, even today. I thought, modern me 2-3 years ago, thought, yeah, well, balloon busting, how hard is that compared to shooting down other guys? It's much harder and much more important. But the thing about Frank Luke is that the legend of Frank Luke is he swore that they'd never take him alive. He gets shot down. This is how I heard the story in elementary school. He's shot down. There's a German patrol approaching. Luke jumps out of the airplane, pulls his Colt, semi-automatic, starts firing at these guys, and then this German patrol shoots him dead, and there are 7 dead Germans there on the ground. That's how I heard the story. Because that's how the story was formed, and the story was formed in 1918, and that's how America wanted its heroes in 1918, and up until the present day. So the question is, what really happened? Well, that didn't happen, not the way that history passed it down to us. So I'm reading this incredible book by Stephen Skinner, and I'm wondering how is he going to deal with this? What's he doing? He's making it clear that the historical story as told just plain didn't happen. So I'm thinking, okay, so is this going to be yet another one of these attempts to demythologize our heroes? Is that what this is? And I realized, no, the reason that Stephen Skinner put that much work into it, and the reason that the story put the hook into me so much is that's not what happened. What happened is more impressive than that if you really think about it. What actually happened, and G.K. Masterson for Super Chat there before I forget, have you been to see or do you plan to see Sound of Freedom? Tim Poole says it's really great story, both story and production-wise. Haven't even heard of it, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. So without giving away the whole movie, although I'm about to give away the whole movie, basically what actually did happen was Luke did get shot on his final mission. He got shot, had to land his airplane. He was wounded. He didn't leap out of the airplane and advance towards towards the oncoming German patrol. He couldn't get out of the plane because he'd been shot through both lungs, and the blood was filling his lungs. And every time he took a breath, there was less room for air. The blood inside his chest was accumulating. So he's having a difficult time breathing, and every time he breathes, it gets more difficult. He's badly, badly wounded, and he cannot get out of the airplane. One of his shoulders is useless because of the round that he took. And so instead of hopping out of the airplane, he just can't move this arm. He can't get out of the airplane. So instead of leaping out the left side, and like you would getting off a horse and cowboying out and running after these guys, he manages to crawl up onto the side of the canopy rail, not the way he would normally get out. And instead of swinging his legs out, he can't do that either. He manages to pull himself up, sit on the edge of a canopy rail, and then fall over backwards. A decent drop, probably 5-6 foot drop at least, flat on his back into the mud. And then he manages to get to his feet and starts heading for this little clump of bushes, really not even a copse of trees, right along a little creek. And Steve Skinner has stood right on the spot. And I plan to go see that spot because I need to feel it. And so Luke is lying on the ground, and it's not a German patrol coming after him. He had landed very close to a German artillery unit. And so soldiers from that, armed soldiers, are coming after him, but it's not a patrol. He hears them coming. He's lying on his back there in the mud. He's looking up at the sky. He's starting to gray out. I'm sorry, he's lying on his face in the mud, and he's starting to gray out. And somehow, he manages to get his arms underneath him and push himself up to his feet and stand there, and he can hear these guys, and he fires a shot in their direction. Steve Skinner says that by this point he was probably so oxygen deprived that his vision had gone. He could still hear things. So fires one round, the villagers hear it, fires another one, fires 3 shots, doesn't hit anybody. Now the Germans are being a lot more careful, and they come through the woods, and when they find him, he's lying there looking at the sky, and he's dead, and his boots are pointing up at the sky, and there's smoke coiling out of the barrel of his 45, which is in his hand. And so, is that a better ending? Is that a more heroic ending than standing up and saying, well, damn you rotten, Hun bastards, this is for you and Kaiser Bill, bam, 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 got me. I think it's much more heroic. And has the benefit of being true. So, that's kind of the meta for me on this. The meta is, well, Road Rider, the second I was trying to think of it, Road Rider just appeared and said, reality is better. Yes, that should be my motto. I think that's my mantra. Whenever I do anything that's historical based, the reality is better than anything I can come up with. It's better than anything anybody else can come up with. And this is the reason that these stories need to be told, because people cannot believe this actually happened. It's better. It's better. The story of Midway was better than what they did to Midway to try to make it more dramatic. You can't make it more dramatic. You can't improve on the story of Taffy 3. Can't improve on the story of Spruance turning on the landing lights and Michener, the carrier guy, saying, yeah, all right, well, we got to save our guys. It's much more heroic to me to be lying there in the mud face down and your lungs are filling with blood. You've got maybe a minute or two left on this earth. And instead of simply just closing your eyes and going to sleep, which is the thing to do, the easy thing to do, to have the force of will to stand up and go out the way you said you were going to go out, and shooting in the direction of guys because you're so badly wounded that your eyesight is gone. I mean, he wasn't shot in the eyes. It's just when your brain runs out of blood, vision's the first thing that disappears. That's why when you pull out of a steep dive and you take a lot of G's, pilots black out. They've still got consciousness, the vision's gone. Yes, Roadrunner says it's a last act of defiance. That's exactly what it is. It's a last act of defiance, and we could use a little more actual last acts of defiance in this culture. After watching what happened with the pandemic and all the rest of it, a little bit of good old American defiance is something that this culture could definitely use, and I'm very proud to be able to be a part of it. So that's that. Okay, now let's trot into the membership den of. All I have to say about the members forum at BillWhittle.com is nowhere will you find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy, and that's something that all of our members are very, very proud of. Here we go. Let's see what's up. Frank Luke. The picture of him graduating flight school was taken about 9 months before he died. And he looks like the son of the man he was going to be in 9 months. He aged so much in those 9 months. He looked like the pictures that you see of Frank Luke, there's really two of them. He looks like this 35, 40-year-old man who's seen too much, because he was. 2 years earlier than that, he's an 18-year-old kid, and he's got a little baby fat on, big smile, happy, ready to go. It's before he got into this meat grinder, flying in airplanes that are made out of fabric and wood with no parachutes. And if you were lucky in that war, you got killed by a bullet instantly. That's not usually what happened. Usually your wings came off and you got to ride the airplane down into the ground, or you're on fire and you got to ride the airplane into the ground. Significant number of pilots in that war used their revolvers on the way down because they were on fire. That's not something they talked about a lot, but that's something we're going to show. If you're on your way down to your certain death because your wings are off and you're on fire, I think I'd probably use the revolver too. All right, so let's see what we got here. That's not a decision I would like to face, mind you, and I'm not likely to have to face it thanks to the people that actually did go and face it. Sorry, I've been talking and not thinking. We just got to do this way here in a second. How do you not tell these? Well, I know why they don't tell these stories. I know why. But that doesn't mean we have to like it, and it doesn't mean we have to go along with it. And I think you tell these stories realistically, you're going to get an audience, an enthusiastic audience. And I'm betting the farm on that. And I know I'm right on this one. Sorry, here we go. Member forum. Look at these scallywags and malcontents and desperados. Miscreants is the word I'm looking for. Okay, here we go. And thanks again to everybody, to GK and Marusha and Henry and all the people that, take care of this thing for free, because they're just excellent people, so we're very grateful. Just taking a look here. Okay. All right, let's see what we can do with these. We're going to have to do one to a customer here. And we'll start with Marusha Dark, because she's a 5-star member, and he or she has done a wonderful job here. So here we see what we got. The topic is cis slurs are censorship, because Elon Musk has banned the word cis from Twitter, which is I have mixed feelings about. I don't like banning any words on Twitter, but I do like watching the people who've been trying to shut everybody else up get shut up for a change. Strange times we live in. Bill, I know you have no love for the word cis, but I also know you said before that if someone makes a reasonable case, you're willing to amend your views. This is not to excuse the attacks on normal people by the woke left. I get that, but personally, I'm concerned about Elon calling cis a slur on Twitter, and my hope is that he won't censor it because while cis can be a slur, it's also a descriptor, one that goes back to the 1800s, and it just means on this near side, whereas trans means on the far side. The same prefix as in the transplant or transatlantic or transhumanist, of which I consider myself one. And there's more to this, but let me just address one thing here. This is what the trans people are saying. I'll get to the rest of your question, and I understand that this is a partially read question, okay? So I just want to answer this while it's fresh in my mind, and what you write next may completely undo everything, but let me just deal with this real fast. Trans activists say cis is not a slur, that it's a term that's been in common usage and so on. And there is one thing that I would say I am actually an expert in this world. There's a lot of things I know a bit about and I'm enthusiastic about, but there's one thing I think I am actually an expert in, and that's the English language. And I have never heard the term cis in my life prior to 2 years ago, ever. I've never heard it. When they started saying cis, I had no idea what they're talking about. This idea that this word is a commonly used word that suddenly people are taking offense to it's just not true. The word cis did not exist in the English language, in usage in the English language, prior to a year or two ago. And they can say, well, this guy coined the term, and whenever the hell he coined the term, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It's not, I have never heard that adjective applied to anything, ever. And I know this language. I read a lot and I write a lot. I've never heard of it. Cisalpine, okay. I may have heard the term cisalpine. I never thought about it, but cis is not a term. And the reason that they're using, well, let me read the rest of Marusha's question and then I'll tell you why. Although, even before reading the question, I think we probably agree that banning things is probably not the way to go. Sometimes it is very satisfying. So let's see what else we got here on this question. Okay. I put it to you that just as cis can be a slur or a descriptor, so too can gay or girl or white boy, depending on context, and we'd both be up in arms if those words ever got censored. Why is this any different in principle, apart from the number of people it affects? Not sure about you, but I've been noticing a growing sentiment among people on the right that want to dial the clock back all the way to before gay rights, or in some cases women's rights, calling these mistakes that led us here. Frankly, I find that alarming, but really, what's to stop it beyond the same hollow promise the left gave that this wouldn't lead to a slippery slope? Also, just as an aside, there's already a term in pop culture for people who only want to date cis people and not trans people. If you're straight, the term in common parlance is super straight, and if you're gay, it's super gay. Well, first of all, trans people find the word super straight to be an abomination of a slur that must be eliminated from the speech. They absolutely despise the term, and they think it's homophobic, transphobic, and all the rest of it. Secondly, I'm not going to call myself super straight because I'm straight, and I'm not going to call myself a cis man because I'm a man. I'm a normal man. Most of you are normal men and normal women, and now we get to the whole reason why why this term cis has appeared. To some degree, as I said, I don't believe in banning words as slurs and so on. But in a larger context, what Elon Musk is doing is he is thwarting their strategy. I'll get to the strategy in a second. You say that, some words can be a descriptor, like gay can be either a descriptor or a slur, same as white boy. True for both of those words, but if I called somebody a screaming faggot, I probably wouldn't get away with it. That's not a term that is generally used as a descriptor. That's a slur. And so I don't really buy that particular aspect of the argument. If the term had been in common usage before, that's one thing, but it wasn't. And now we get to the point of this whole argument. John Frost says, I'm a sissy. I've had my head so close to that. I've just been circling around it. I just said, there's something there. I couldn't put my finger on it. And you nailed it for me. Yes, we're all sissies. That's what we are. That's what we should call ourselves. I think it's hilarious, frankly. I'm not, if you're going to call me cis, I'm loving this better by the second. John Frost wins the internet for the day. Yes, next time the subject comes up, if somebody says, well, you're a cis male, I say, please. I find the term cis male to be offensive. If you're going to refer to me as cis, I insist that you call me a sissy. We're all a bunch of sissies. All us straight people. We're all just a bunch of sissies. I love it. 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 One of my favorite things I have ever heard on the internet ever, and you win the internet for the day, sir. Thank you for that valuable weapon, mimetic weapon. That's right. We're all sissies, all of us straight people. What are you guys? You a bunch of sissies? Yeah, that's what we are. All right, so to the point, right? Cis-he, says Dave Olson, for putting a little icing on the cake there. Cis-he's. We're cis-he's. We're just sissies. We're all just a bunch of sissies. And that's what's happening to the American culture, by the way. Western culture. You're right. All of the straight men are just a bunch of cis-he's. We're all sissies, all of us. All right, so here we go. Oh, CP Tomes putting down a marker. I am a thermonuclear, ultra-cis, MAGA, knuckle-dragging, heavily armed a-hole. And a racist too, all the rest. Cis, hers, all the rest. Okay, well, here's the point, right? The term cis has to be fought tooth and nail, and the reason it has to be fought tooth and nail is because the term has been introduced in the language for a very specific political objective, political goal, and that's why it's there. And here's what the political goal is. Prior to this recent bout of insanity that we've been suffering, we would say that there were two kinds of humans. There is, in fact, one human binary, and that is sex. Your sex. You notice these people don't call themselves transsexuals. The offensive tranny, who I admire very much on YouTube, one of my favorite channels, that person is a transsexual. Transgender can mean anything because gender means anything. As you well know, there's 195 of them or something like that. New ones invented every day. It's really, in terms of science, it's really the bleeding edge of discovery. So what's going on with this term cis? Well, prior to this enforced mass psychological delusion, there were two kinds of human beings. In fact, two kinds of animals. Virtually all animals. In fact, I can't think of a multicellular animal that's an exception. There are males and females. Everything else is on a spectrum. These people are saying they're non-binary. The only thing binary about the human species is male or female. XX, XY. That's the only binary thing. Height, skin color, intelligence, speed, strength, all of this stuff is on an infinitely gray spectrum, but the only thing that's binary is male and female. And this is what the world has been dealing with for, I don't know, 250,000 years we've been modern humans. But 250,000 minutes ago, somebody decided that wasn't going to be good enough. So what the difference is that the reason the word cis has been introduced to the language is because the political objective is to change the binary. It's no longer about men and women. It is you prior to this movement, you were either a male or a female. Now you're either cis or trans. That's the new binary. You're either cis or trans. You see? Male and female, I'm not a biologist, and I'm certainly trying to, follow the science, but male and female has a scientific basis to it. And so what they do with the language, as they always do with the language, is they weaponize the language so that we will no longer be thinking about men and women anymore. Now that the classes of people will be cis and trans. And the reason that cis has been invented is if you agree to buy into this, if you buy into this trap of using the word cis, what they have accomplished, whether you realize it or not, is they have made cis and trans into equal weight. They're both perfectly normal. Could have just been a flip of a coin. It depends on, you see, your gender, what you used to call your sex, male or female. No, that's not biologically determined. That was assigned to you at birth by a doctor, and maybe the doctor was having a bad day, so maybe he assigned you as a male when really should have assigned you by female. Don't worry about the body parts. Don't worry about the chromosomes. We are going to reconstruct reality in our image. This is what the progressives want to do, and the reason they're going for this one is because it is the single most obvious thing in front of our faces. If they can get you to take a knee to this issue, this is why they're fighting on this hill. If they can get you to take a knee to the most obvious thing in front of your face, the difference between men and women, if they can get you to agree that this is just an opinion and that there's no external reality about men and women, then they win. Everything after that is easy compared to this. If they can convince you to take a knee on this one, then they win, which is why I'm not going to play the game. I'm just not. And why, while I am against censorship, I find Elon's decision to ban this word from Twitter, I find this to be strong evidence that Elon understands what's going on here in this culture war. He understands why this word is being introduced to the language, and he's simply saying, no, not gonna let that happen on this social media platform that I own. I am going to declare it a slur. Do I think it's a slur? I don't actually think it's a slur. I don't think it's personally a slur, but I take offense at it. So I guess it is a slur. If a trans person came up to me and said, well, you're a cis male, I said, no, I'm not. I'm actually just a normal male. I'm a normal man. You don't get to define me. I find your language offensive and heterophobic and deeply, deeply problematic. You heterophobe. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to equalize it. Normalize it is the word. For those of you who've had the mixed experience of following Dylan Mulvaney closely, prior to Dylan's breakout success, and to his credit, JT and Odin's Ben was on the Dylan Mulvaney thing easily 6 months before Dylan Mulvaney became a national phenomenon. Of the many, I've never heard the term heterophobic before. I just kind of came up with it on my own, but that's really what it is, right? You heterophobes. So when Dylan was doing his 300, day 97 of girlhood, he's this stick-thin gay man. Yes, you heard me, YouTube, and I don't care anymore. I just don't care. So do what you want to do. And he's wearing like a top and shorts. And he's at the beach as a woman, and he's explaining to the audience, saying, I was there and people were looking at me, and I was wondering, why were they looking at me? I thought I looked pretty good, and I realized they were looking at the bulge. Not much of a bulge, but nevertheless, there it is. Women are not supposed to have bulges there, and Dylan does. So Dylan breaks into song. He starts singing about normalize the bulge, which made my skin crawl off of my body and climb into the closet. I look like a video game character. I look like a skinned human being. My skin just got it just left the room, and I'm stuck there just covered in slime and muscle material. My skin crawled off my body hearing him sing this. But what he's saying is exactly precisely correct. He's precisely on target with this. This is exactly what he wants to do. They want to normalize female bulges. They want to normalize it. They want you. If they can get you to believe that females have a penis, then it's game over. It's game over. If they can get you to buy into that, then anything else they try to sell you is cake after this. You see? Cake. This is why this issue has to be fought, and this is the hill that we're going to fight on and die on. But we're not going to die in this hill. This is the hill we're going to win on, because this is a bridge too far for them, a hill too far. People are not buying this. People don't want anything to do with it. Their strongest allies, let's not forget, the Democratic Party is powered by the votes of blacks, to some degree Hispanics, and especially white liberal women. That's their base. And the progressives in the Democratic Party are forcing this on society, thinking that it's going to bring their allies with them. However, it turns out that in their heart of hearts and in their little private moments alone with their cats, white liberal women don't like being called birthing people or chest feeders or people with, latest term, people with a bonus hole. That's the term that the trans community is now trying to use to describe the female anatomy. It's a bonus. How about that? They don't like it. Straight women don't like it. And now, as I pointed out in the last right angle from last week, I heard the term cis lesbians, which may sound to you like it doesn't make sense, but it does make sense. According to their language rules, if you are a lesbian, we have to define you. You can't just be a woman who is attracted to women. That's a lesbian, and everybody knows what that is, so that's got to go. You are a cis lesbian. And the difference between a cis lesbian, the reason you have to call them a cis lesbian instead of just a lesbian is because men who transition to become women and who are then attracted to women are also lesbians, you see? So there are cis lesbians and there are trans lesbians. I'm not making this up. This is the current battle du jour. The trans activists are saying that men who identify as women and who are attracted to women are lesbians. We all clear on this? So, this is why they are pushing this so hard. This is why Dylan Mulvaney is at the White House. This is why the President of the United States is talking about trans people being the foundation of the country and the best people we have. And this is why companies will ruin their brand and ruin their sales in order to get that ESG score, which is more important than the sales, or if it wasn't, they wouldn't do it. Everybody knows that this is going to cost you sales. So why do companies keep doing it? There's no other explanation other than the fact that their best financial case is to lose sales rather than get a low ESG score. Why did the NBA back Colin Kaepernick and take a knee on the national anthem? National Football League is composed. Football fans are the most patriotic Americans as a large group that I can think of in the country. I cannot think of a larger group of primarily patriotic people, mostly men, than American football fans. The NFL fan base is the most patriotic, large group of people in the country. I'm not saying they're the only patriots. I'm saying in terms of just sheer numbers, that's where I would go. NASCAR, okay, NASCAR's bigger. You're right, NASCAR wins. NFL is second. Completely right. Got it. But with that said, why would the NFL do this? Why would the NFL do this incredible financial harm to themselves? There's no other explanation for it. It has to be in their financial interest to do it. And That means that stuff is going on backstage in terms of what their score is and how the finances work. And we live in a world where money doesn't exist anymore. When you owe $33,000 billion that will never be repaid, money is no longer money. We're not dealing with the world that we think we're dealing with here. This isn't a conspiracy. There's just obvious fact. You cannot owe $33,000 billion and keep adding thousands of billions of dollars every year and tell me that money still means what we think money means. It doesn't. It's not. I don't know what it is, but it's not money. So all of this stuff is an indication that this is coming from, this is not a grassroots movement. Grassroots movement, it isn't a grassroots movement. It's the opposite of the grassroots movement. It's a top-down movement. The people in power, like the so-called president of the United States, are forcing Americans to buy this. And things like the NCAA are forcing Americans to buy this. And the progressives and the liberals, who spent their entire life fighting for things like Title IX and girls being able to compete in sports and stuff, now find themselves having to cheer the fact that a male just beat the living daylights out of their daughter, who's been training to be an Olympic swimmer for 15 years, and now they have to stand there and applaud the fact that her best time is 30 seconds slower than this grown man who's grown his hair out and feels like a woman today. So this is why they have to do their doublethink. Got 2 super chats here as a Sacred Order of Knightly Valor. I keep seeing 1,000. Oh, and it's 1,000 yen. I thought, well, that's, thank you anyway. Sex and gender are 2 different Latin words. Sex comes from seco, as in section, or this half of a category. Gender comes from gene, meaning as born, as created, as in Genesis. I understand there's a difference between sex and gender. I do. I just still think that there's 2 sexes and there's 2 genders. Well, 4, maybe. There's no question that sex is male and female. There's no question about it. Every time people argue, well, how do you define a woman? It's like, look, just stop, because people can have body parts lopped on, created, accidents can happen, none of that. I've heard Matt Walsh say it's potential. That's a good argument, but no. Any cell in your body, your fingernails, your hair, anything will go to a lab, instantly tell you whether you're a male or female because of the chromosomes, period. That's the definition. Don't let anybody trap you in anything else. They're saying, well, so your definition of a woman is somebody who gives birth? Well, what if a woman's had a hysterectomy? Does that mean they're not a woman? No, I never said that. No, that's not my definition. XXXY is my definition, because I know what you're going to do with it. We know what a man and a woman is. We all know. Everybody knows. But I'm not going to fall into your rhetorical trap. I'm not going to walk into your kill box. So if you want to play this game of pretending like we don't know the most obvious thing that everybody does know, then fine, I'll play that game with you. My definition of a woman is my biological definition of a woman, because it turns out I am an amateur biologist, so I'm going to go with XX and XY. Yes. Any other questions about this? Yes, we're talking about XX, XY. Nothing you say has anything to do with anything. That's the definition, and that's where we're going. Now, if you don't want to follow the science, that's your business. Here's another super chat from Cody Fett. There's another explanation, Bill. The executives and marketers spent 10 years on Twitter, and they hired people from leftist colleges. It's worse than money. It's social proof. Yes, absolutely true. Absolutely true that there is a strong social pressure on these rich. The Democratic Party is now the party of the super rich, and it has been for quite a long time. And so this is quite a bit of a change. The Democratic Party, if the Republican Party as a group of people, as a political entity, had fundamental competence, I mean 6th grade competence in anything, we should be able to mop the floor with these people, because the Democratic Party brand is the party of the little guy, and they have not been the party of the little guy for a long time, and we are too stupid to pick up that football and run down the field unopposed and spike it. We're just too dumb to figure that out. They're not the party of the little people. They're the party of the super rich. That's who the Democrats are. They're the super rich and the super crazy. That's the coalition. Anyway, yes, there's a great deal of social proof, and the executives of these companies want to go to their cocktail parties in the Hollywood Hills and in New York skyscrapers and talk about all of how progressive they are. Absolutely true, but you cannot get away from stockholder revenge. You cannot go out there and lose $27 billion like Anheuser-Busch has and survive unless there is a financial upside to it. And there is. And the same thing goes for the NFL. They can do all the virtue signaling they want to. I completely agree with your point, but you can't tank a company for that. And so that tells me that there is something, there is a financial motive for the woke phenomenon that we are not seeing, and that it has to do with very large scale financing behind the scenes, because it's guys like BlackRock who are the ones who are creating this score in the first place. The score didn't exist 2-3 years ago, or if it did, nobody knew about it. So this whole World Economic Forum thing, it makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I guess I am, because unlike before, when I was wrong about this, I didn't have any evidence. Now I have more evidence and I know what to do with. I have tons of evidence that this is going on, actual evidence, so now I'm a believer of this kind of thing. I changed my mind based on the preponderance and the credibility of the evidence that I've seen since 2020. So something is going on here, and the cis, the word cis is the sharp point of the spear, designed to make us surrender reality. If we buy into this game, we lose. This is one of those examples that Andrew Breitbart was just so clear on. It's war games, right? The only way to win this is to not play the game. If you get into this game, if you start doing that, you lose. Eric Blake says a lot of this has to do with the CCP and China. Yes. If you think that a company has a lot of influence, if you think of a company that has big money, Apple or somebody like that, right? They might be, there was a time, before Elon came along, but there was a time, 10, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when it looked like Apple was going to be the first $1 trillion company. I don't know if it ever got to that point. I don't believe there is a $1 trillion company yet, but in any event, $1 trillion company, that's a big deal. BlackRock has allegedly got $10 trillion of capital at its disposal. That's a big money too. And the only thing that makes that money look small is is how much money a country has. And when you've got China as the second biggest economy in the world, now you're talking about trillions of dollars at your disposal, not just billions, trillions. Oh, Apple just peaked at over $3 trillion in market cap. Well, I'm obviously way behind the times. In any event, yes, I'm wrong. I'm behind the times on this one. It doesn't really matter. $3 trillion is a lot of money, but the only thing that makes that look like small change is the amount of money available to a nation that has the second largest GDP in the world. And that's basically what's going on right now. If you really want to step back, I hadn't really thought of it this way, but take a step back and then go take 2 or 3 more steps back. Okay, so SpaceX is not yet a $1 trillion company. I was just plain wrong about that. That's fine. Take 2 or 3 steps back and think about what we're seeing in front of our eyes here. What's going on right now in America is a silent mimetic war, a war of ideas between the biggest economy in the world and the second biggest economy in the world. The second biggest economy in the world has launched an offensive, a mimetic, societal, corrosive destabilization of the largest economy in the world, because even though it is costing them trillions of dollars, it is a brilliant investment on their part. This is, I've never put it quite so clearly before, I've never thought about it quite so clearly, but what is clear to me for a long time is, if you're China, you can't catch the United States militarily. You can't. We have been spending $600 billion a year or something like that for 50 years. China cannot catch us militarily. Never. Never. So, China will never have 12 carrier battle groups, ever. They don't. It's not even a question of not having the money. They don't have the expertise. They don't know how to do it. They don't have land sea operations. They don't have combined command and control structure. Culturally, they will never have them. So what do they do about the largest economy having 12 carrier battle groups, just as one example of our military power? Well, if it turns out that you can create a society where people don't want to serve on those carrier groups, or if they do, they're determined to sink them or sabotage them because they're so convinced that the flag that they're supposedly fighting for is so evil, then it doesn't matter if you have 12 carrier battle groups or 3 or 3,000. If they're not going to be used because you have corrupted the morality of the people in the largest economy in the world, then your investment is enormously productive. In other words, they don't have to spend the money on getting 12 carrier battle groups. For much less money than that, they can make sure that we don't use ours or can't use ours. That's the meta. And this is me just speculating. This Chinese operational report that came out a couple years ago was talking about how to defeat the United States. They openly admitted they could never catch us militarily. So they were talking about things like this. They were talking about things like biological weapons. Imagine that. They were talking about things like propaganda. They were talking about things like subversion. They're talking about things like reinventing history, talking about changing the culture. These are investments in them. And when people say, well, why would China do that? Well, China just wants to buy things, right? So Hollywood's just catering them to... No, it's not. They're not being passive about this. China's not saying, we don't want to buy that, so we're not going to buy that, so make us something that we want. That's what it looks like on the outside. Hollywood is saying, well, we'll make movies that make China happy because we want the China market. That's what it looks like at first glance. But it's not that passive. China is not just sitting there saying, well, we want this, we don't want that. No, China is saying, we are going to deploy our GNP. We're going to deploy our GNP to achieve this goal of subverting the United States of America. That's how we're going to win. We're going to win by making sure that America falls apart. And they've been very successful at it. Unfortunately for them, like all of our enemies, they have grossly underestimated our ability to the fundamental strength of this country. So they have allies, like, as Isle Pink points out, Dr. Fauci. So Dr. Fauci decides, for whatever megalomaniacal reasons, that he wants to make fatal viruses out of viruses that are not normally fatal. There's going to be some good reason for that, but he says it's so we can come up with vaccines. Okay. I don't believe that, but let's take him at his word. He decides he wants to do this gain-of-function research, and America, still having some elements of being a free country, elects a Congress that says, we don't think this is a good idea. And despite all the odds, this is years ago, tells Dr. Fauci, no, you can't do that kind of research in America because we find that to be dangerous and certainly not worth whatever potential risk might be there. So what does Dr. Fauci do? Well, he conducts the research in China. Why is it that China is the government of China? The Wuhan Virology Institute does exist. That is where the virus came from. And there's no question about that. And there was no question about that in April of 2020, by the way. So what does that say? Forget about what it says about Fauci. We already know what it says about Fauci. You can't do this work in America, Dr. Fauci. It's too dangerous. Oh, well, if it's too dangerous, I should stop doing it then. I don't want to wipe out the world. No, he doesn't say that. He says, well, if I can't do it in America, I'll do it in China. But what does it say about China? That's the big issue here. What does it say about China that they are not only willing but enthusiastic about doing the kind of research that the American government has said is illegal in this country because it's too dangerous? What does that say about them? I know what it says about Fauci. What does it say about China? Well, what it says about China is a worldwide shutdown hurts China badly, but China has totalitarian control over their own people, and this is just a exercise for them. The people it really hurts are the number one economy of the world, and most especially, the fluke of a president who is not playing ball with the Chinese. That's who's going to get hurt by releasing a bioweapon. That's what's going to happen, is this man who actually stood up to China, who actually took America's side in this argument, this president of the United States, was well on his way to winning a second term because the economy was a-hummin' and nobody even knew that Joe Biden was in the race. And then the next thing you know, there's this worldwide pandemic. China is cutting, this is historical fact, not speculation here. China, for 4 weeks, said no one can fly from Wuhan to any other part of China. It's locked down. There's a disease there. There's a virus. However, while you cannot fly from Wuhan to Beijing or Shanghai, you can fly from Wuhan to Los Angeles. And they did for about a month. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? So, this is an investment for them. It's an investment. And it is an investment that totals tens of trillions of dollars. And so we need to understand that's what's going on. And we also, and this is not pleasant, we also have to understand that the people who have rightfully generated so much hatred among us, people who are trying to destroy this country, these progressives, we have to understand that to a large degree, they are being manipulated, and on some level, it's not their fault. I'm not saying that they're not responsible for their actions, and I'm saying this isn't easy, but what I am saying is when you realize that the objective is to split the country in the middle and have one half of the country hate the other, you got to recognize that by doing that, you're playing into their hands. As much as it pains me to say so, I need to constantly walk back from this sense of the progressives are killing everything and just say to myself, no, what's killing everything is this artificial division. Scott told a story on the Backstage show this week for members only. He was talking about being on his regular walk, and it was Independence Day, and somebody planted all those little flags all around, which are great and nice and patriotic, except those little flags fall over, and that can be a problem for people who care about the flag. And Scott said he was walking along, and he was late for getting back to do the right angle shows, and he saw a man who was putting those flags back in the ground, and they looked up at each other, and Scott said, "Thank you." And the guy gave him a look like, "Well, sure, what else am I supposed to do?" And then Scott says, and it was a black guy. And I said, well, of course it's a black guy, because it's not a black guy, it's another American. You get out of an elevator, you hold the door at 7-Eleven for somebody, and somebody says, "Thank you," and you realize all of this stuff is imposed on us. It's ginned up. Now, that's not to say it's not taking effect. These Gen Zers are convinced that they live in Nazi Germany, and I really want them to spend a few days in Nazi Germany just so they can realize that. And there we go. And that's why I wrote Empire of Terror, because I want people to understand how these murderers operate by convincing people that they're working in their best interest until they have enough power to drop that facade and then start killing people. Cody Fett for Super Chat says, also Freedom Alternative a few months ago came up with the receipts that the biggest financial involvement in woke hiring was with the HR managers. Yes. HR. So this disease, it's kind of like AIDS in a way. Now, I don't know if Lord Bios is here to correct me. It's like flying solo for the first time. I think I'm more or less correct when I say this, that no one ever died of AIDS. That AIDS didn't kill anybody. What AIDS did was destroyed the immune system so that other diseases that normally we fight off very easily kill you, like pneumonia or certain other diseases that normally wouldn't be a factor. So while AIDS is responsible for your death, if you didn't have AIDS, you wouldn't have died. It wasn't actually AIDS that killed you. It was the AIDS that took your defenses down and let something else kill you. So that's basically what I think happens if you look back at it. I think that the AIDS came internally, and that China is taking advantage of it. And if I really, really want to trace the roots back on this, because when you said HR, I realized, yes, it's really starting to be clearer to me now. And then I thought, okay, when did HR appear? When did I first hear about HR? Because there was never an HR department in companies before. If you had a problem with the employee, you talked to the supervisor about it. You talked to his boss. You didn't send him down the hall. So when did HR actually start happening? Where did HR come from? And looking back on it, I realized that this is a domestic disease. HR happened because of lawsuits. That's what brought HR into being. Frivolous lawsuits. When people started suing companies, that's when this whole thing happened. When companies stopped fighting back on suits that they knew were false. Somebody makes a false accusation of sexual harassment. This is the 80s now, right? Somebody accuses you of having inappropriately put your hand inside their knee, and you didn't do it. But they're taking you to court to prove that they did because they want money. And so you, in a healthy society, in a sane society, we would have gone to court, would have won that case because the burden of proof is on them. They couldn't prove it because it didn't happen. And then they would not have won the case. They would not have won the money. They wouldn't have gotten rich off of it. Neither would the lawyers that brought the case, and then countersue for defamation. If we had done that, then we would be fine. But that's not what we did, right? We didn't do the right thing. We did the smart thing. So what happens? This story goes back to the mid-'80s. My dear friend, my second father, Jerry Stipp, who was really another dad to me, told me this happened to him in his company. And he said, I just kept saying we got to go to court on this. And he kept saying, our lawyers are telling me again and again and again, Jerry, here's what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. Okay? We know that this didn't happen, but if you decide to fight this, it's going to take 4 or 5 years of your undivided attention. It's going to cost you millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. And when it goes to trial, you are likely to lose because people will buy the emotional argument over evidence. This is the reality of the world we live in. You can do what you want to. It's your company. But our advice as your attorneys is to settle this thing. And so he did. Not because it was easy. He didn't care about being easy. He was dedicated to the truth. He was dedicated to being right. The thing that convinced him to settle was the fact that it wasn't about evidence. He knew he was in the right. He knew he could win a trial that was based on evidence. But society becomes so infantilized, even in the mid-'80s, that if somebody comes in on the stand and starts to cry, then they're going to win because that's how soft people have gotten, how sentimental we are, or sentimentalist we are. So people start realizing it's a get-rich-quick scheme is to sue the company that you work for. If you're unhappy with something, quit, accuse them of something, find an attorney who's going to get a third of this money automatically. He brings the case. They take the case to the company that's innocent and say, we're suing you for sexual harassment, blah, 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 blah. The company makes the same calculation that I just explained. The person says, we want $1 million for damages. The company says, we'll give you $25,000, take it or leave it. They take it. And now we're in a situation where every single corporation in America realizes the vulnerability that they have to this kind of extortion and blackmail, because that's exactly what it is. It is extortion and blackmail. But that's the world, so they decide, what can we do to defend ourselves? And the defense is, we will have a human resources department. What? Yes. Well, what is that? Well, we're going to spend the effort, the time, and the money to pay people who don't do anything, who don't produce anything for the company. They don't produce anything. If you're making track shoes, they're not stitching soles together. They're not manufacturing nylon. They're not lacing shoes. They don't do anything. It's just a drain. It's a financial drain. Costs money to pay these people. But in the long run, it saves us money because if we have an HR department, when somebody comes with a complaint, you see, we will be able to say in our defense, well, if this was happening, why did you not take it to HR? If this actually happened, why didn't you go to this person whose only job is to make sure that this doesn't happen? Why did you suddenly just spring it on us in court without talking to HR about it? And that's actually, it turns out, a pretty effective defense against this kind of thing, right? So, I didn't say right. I'm going to stop doing that. It's a pretty good defense against this kind of thing. So companies start developing these HR departments, and the bigger you get, the more you have to have. And now you realize, okay, so what the HR department is essentially, it's a fig leaf. It is a virtue signal for a potential jury to increase your chances of winning a sexual harassment case or whatever case, right? Damn it. Or whatever case. We know we're going to be sued by people who we didn't wrong. We know they're going to come after us. We're going to have an HR department, which will be our legal defense. Why didn't you come to HR when this started? And we could have done something about it. Good point. But now HR is our shield against social injustice, because that's what the appeal is. Oh, you sexually harassed me, or you discriminated against me, or you fired me because I'm black, or you did this or this or this. So not only do we need an HR department, we need an HR department that is as socially progressive and liberal as we can possibly make it. Because the more liberal our HR department is, and the more virtue signaling we do by having things like our Gay Pride Day and decorating our building with the flags and all the rest of it, that improves our legal defense in court if somebody comes and says, you fired me because I'm gay or because I'm trans. What do you mean we fired you because you're trans? We just had our Gay Pride Day. We had gay flags all over our building here at Acme, manufacturing, where we make our earthquake pills. We have our gay flags everywhere. We not only have an HR department, we have an HR department that is aggressively making sure that nobody feels uncomfortable here. And so companies now are not run by the CEO. The CEO doesn't run a modern corporation, neither does the board of directors, neither do the shareholders. The HR department runs the company. The HR department dictates what policy will be, because it has become the perception that if you don't listen to what HR is telling you, you're going to lose your business, not just your market or your customers. You're going to lose the business if you don't have the legal protection of HR, and the more progressive HR is, the better that legal defense is, so get on the stick. And I have never put that together before. That may have been the most important 4 or 5 minutes I've said in the last 20 years. That's exactly what's going on. That's exactly right. I got to clip this out, and I got to put it as a separate post, because that's it. HR determines the direction of a company. It owns the company. The company listens to the HR department. And if the HR department says, you need to do some really, really progressive advertising, and the board says, or the CEO or the CFO says, oh, we're going to lose a lot of sales that way. Well, if you don't, we'll be open to charges of transphobia, which, as you well know, is epidemic out there right now. And we might lose a couple % of sales in a boycott that'll probably just last for, a week or two. But this protection will last forever. So you hire your HR person of color, and you have your seminars where you tell people who've never done anything wrong, who wouldn't dream of sexually harassing a woman, and would probably deck somebody who did. You make sure to have constant seminars saying that raping women is bad, because when somebody decides to sue us, we will be able to say, well, no, we tell our employees that raping women is bad. We told them that on Tuesday. We called the whole staff together. We had a day-long or week-long session on why raping women is bad, and we didn't make anything that week. We just lost money because we think as a company it's really important that we make sure that our employees know that raping women is bad. And here's the world we live in. And China comes along and sees this. And this is what I mean by the AIDS analogy. We did this to ourselves, but when it became clear what we'd manufactured, China looks at this chink in our, if you'll pardon the expression, in our armor, and put the resources of an entire country into that weakness, that fault line in the armor, and just wedged it in there, put everything in there. Here's a place where you can get your spear through. Push, 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 push. So there you go. That's it. And also related to this, at about the same time as the HR department was the extortion racket, was the grift, the con that was essentially invented by Jesse Jackson and perfected by him. And here's how that grift and con worked. Jesse Jackson, and it was the Rainbow Coalition, interesting, because he wasn't talking about gay people at the time. It was, people of different colors. What Jesse Jackson realized was he could make a ton of money, personally and for his organization, by blackmailing companies. And the way you would do that is you would basically say to a bank, hey, look, your lending practices here are unfair to black people. The bank says, on the contrary, we are completely colorblind when it comes to our banking thing. We make our decision predicated completely on the numbers in front of us. We don't discriminate against black people. Jesse Jackson says, well, that may or may not be true, but that's not really the point, because the point is, I'm going to have 200 people in your lobby tomorrow, and we're all going to be having signs talking about how racist your bank is, and we're going to close the bank for the day. We're going to make sure that nobody comes to this bank. We're going to continue to protest outside of this bank, and you're going to continue to lose customers. And you're not only going to lose the people who can't come into the bank that day because they don't want to come past their picket lines, you're also going to lose them forever, because when we tell them that you're racist, some of them will believe it, and probably most of them will. The longer we do it, the more we shout, then that's what we're going to do. So we've just picked your name out of a phone book. Don't take it personally, but that's what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, what do I have to do so that this doesn't happen tomorrow? Well, you could make a donation to our organization. What kind of donation? Oh, I don't know. I would say $200,000 ought to do it for this branch anyway. So I pay you $200,000 for what? I pay you $200,000 so that you don't come and accuse me of the racism that I'm not doing anyway? Okay, I guess I have no choice. And this is where we lost. It's not where we lost the country, because you can't lose the country. Country's an idea, but this is our midway, and we're the Japanese in this one. This is where we really, 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 really made a mistake. We did the right thing. We did the smart thing instead of the right thing. And that's the road to hell. And this is the world they're trying to create. They're trying to create a world now where the smart thing is not the right thing. Bill, have you read Antonio Gramsci? He was an extremely influential socialist, especially in the field of critical theory. Yes, Gramsci and, believe it or not, a guy named Horkheimer, not Jack Horkheimer, another Horkheimer, were the proponents of the Frankfurt School. Gramsci was really the architect of it, and then Alinsky became the guy who drew the blueprint. Omega and Yang, 802 says, nice bank you have there. Pity if something happened to it. And that's how it works. So these two things together coalesce, and then banks and other companies decide, wow, it's not about being in business anymore. Now it's about, again, one of the reasons I love doing the show is because I really get clarity of things that have been floating around in my mind that I haven't really quite put together without going on one of these rants. But yes, that's exactly it. Somewhere in the 80s, because of the out-of-control lawsuits, if the loser paid, we wouldn't be in this mess. That would be a good system. Because if the loser paid, there would not be these gratuitous lawsuits. If there were not gratuitous lawsuits, there wouldn't be HR departments. If there weren't HR departments, there wouldn't be decisions made that have nothing to do with business and are completely political. That, give me a second. Just give me 1 second. Almost there. Okay. So that's what it was. It was an act of cowardice. It was an act of cowardice. You are presented with a choice. One of them is the smart choice, the other one is the right choice. And you take the smart choice. And you lose. Now they own you, which kind of ties into the cis argument, because once you take the knee, this is the thing about compliance, about why resistance is important and why they're fighting this transgender battle so hard. If you take a knee on this issue, if you start referring to yourself as cis, if you agree to that term, it's not just that you stop fighting them, it's that you stop fighting anything, because once you take a knee, you have lost your own self-respect. That's the thing I learned about the communists and the Nazis, is that they would force innocent people into complicity, and once they were complicit, their resistance came to an end. So they didn't have to actually, you didn't have to get the population of Germany to actually be in the concentration or the death camps shooting people. All you had to do was make sure that they knew that something was wrong. You didn't even have to they didn't even have to know what was actually happening. They just had to know that something was very, very wrong, because all of their Jewish neighbors were disappearing, and they could tell themselves whatever fiction they wanted to. Oh, well, they've been deported, or Hitler would never kill all those people. They've been deported, or they left, or whatever. Okay, that's fine. But they knew something was wrong. And once they knew something was wrong and didn't do something about it, now you own them. Now they're complicit in the murder. They're not, it's an act of omission rather than commission, but it's still complicity. So you can't fight back when you're a part of the system. In the Soviet Union and Empire of Terror, you find that there are genuine bastards that like to kill people, and then there are people who inform on people who end up getting killed, and they do it because they've got that kind of meter maid sort of, or DMV kind of little power trips that they're on, but also because they finally got a little power and a little respect and a little fear. They're usually loners, these snitches. Every single apartment flat in the Soviet Union had a floor snitch, at least one on the floor. It wasn't like the KGB went after them. They just started calling in. They're just certain percentage of the population is just wired that way. They're angry and they're bitter and they're failures, and now all of a sudden they can make a phone call and make that successful, happy family disappear. And there's no downside. No one's going to know it was them. They don't have to give their name. They just call the local office of the NKVD or the KGB or the Cheka or the OGP, whatever it happened to be at the time. Make a phone call. Hello, comrade. I'm a loyal citizen, and I heard on my floor, at this address on the 4th floor, I heard this family in this apartment. I heard them speaking French on the telephone. I think they might be spies, and then they're gone. So that person's complicit. But the people who are also complicit are the people who live next to those people that disappeared, because they didn't inform on them, and they certainly didn't murder them, but they knew they had been murdered, and they didn't do anything about it. And that's how they operate. And they're very effective. I see so much damage. I still don't for a second believe they're going to win. This is authoritarianism and censorship. I hope you're listening, YouTube. Censorship is what cowards do. Censorship is what you resort to when you have an inferior product. Censorship is what you do when truth is not on your side. And so I believe in the giant wrecking ball of reality, and it's starting to hit them pretty hard. I'd love to say that we argued our way out of it, but we didn't. We did our best, but the big wheel turns and things happen, but we don't want censorship because we're not afraid of the truth. And we're not afraid of the truth because our philosophy is not predicated on inverting the truth. And I think with one question done, and this continuous sense of guilt and shame I feel for not doing more of them, I think it's probably a good idea for me to wrap this up right now, because this is a showmanship talking rather than businessman talking. If I was being more of a businessman, I'd answer more of these questions and stop shooting our members, but I think this is time for me to close this one up, because anything after, if you want a 3-hour tour, you got a 2-hour and 20-minute tour. I think anything after this is going to just, I don't have anything left, let's put it that way. This was a serious, important little interaction that we've had here, and I think that anything I add to it right now is going to water it down for me. And one of the main reasons I think I should stop now is because I want to go out of this show with this stuff in my head so I can make some sense out of it. Because I actually think that last bit, the whole HR bit, is actually really pretty important. And as I often say to Natasha, whenever I finish a speaking event, the first thing I do, I come back down, amidst the roar of the applause, obviously. I have to usually shout in her ear. But the first thing I always say was I any good? Yeah, you were real good. What did I say? I'm not really saying these things. I'm just kind of channeling them. So I know the main problem, of course, with doing an internet show is I don't get to hear the roaring applause. But fortunately, I do have one of those miraclier things that you guys can't see, and I'm not going to show you. And I've got a little dial here, so whenever I see something I really, really like, turn it. That's why I often pause or lose track when you see me go off the rails like that, on something, and Eric is screaming, "Stay on target, stay on target!" And I'm going, no, it's because of the sound of the applause and the cheering and the chanting of my name over and over again. It can be very distracting sometimes, but what's the point of doing this if you don't have that? The Strato Catharsis Lounge, Dave Olson, you're a fine fellow. By the way, Dave, since you're here, I got to tell you, on my most miserable days, and I have to do this show sometimes when I'm not feeling good, and sometimes I do the show not feeling good, but most of the time I'm affected by this. But on every single show, Dave, no matter how bad I'm feeling, every time we kick this thing off and you do your mission control thing, flight go, Fido go, it just makes me happy. It just cheers me up. So there you go. We can hear the vacuum cleaners, the janitorial death squad's on its way, so I'm going to have to cheese it. I missed that. I missed that expression. I never used it. Never got to use it. Yep, there it is. Booster, go. Retro, go. Guido, go. Fido, go. Ecom, go. Telmu, go. GNC, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, we are go for strata lounging. It makes me happy. It makes me happy every single time. I'm very grateful. Okay, kids, well, that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, which is made possible by the members of BillWhittle.com who stay with us through thick and thin, and it's been thin lately because Bill's been working real hard on things that have enough of a budget behind it to do to make them last, and I'm working real hard on doing something to reimburse you guys for that on some level anyway. But in any event, I'm very grateful as always for the electricity, and my wife and I and all of Steve and Scott and everybody else. It's a small group of people that just pay $9.95 a month, and they keep doing it, and we're still here, and I get to say whatever I want to, because while I may say something that will piss off one or two of you enough to cancel your memberships, I'm not talented enough to say something to piss off all of you. So here we are, we stay in business. So that's something I'm very grateful for. And some pay more. Well put, Mr. Tomes. Some people pay $49 a month, and those people are extra special. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't pay anything. We're just happy to get the message out, and that's what the members are all about, is getting the message out. Okay, so that'll do it. We'll see you on Monday for Stratosphere Studios. We'll actually have something to show, something of some progress. Who knows? This thing may actually get off the ground after all. Somebody pointed out that this would be a good thing to have the astronauts talk about. It would. I was watching a video about body cam footage of this Gen Z girl who got pulled over by the police and couldn't believe she was being arrested. That kind of thing would be fun to talk about too. I'm mostly looking forward to taking letters for that last men on the moon thing, and I like the sound of that. Major Mace Mattingly, thank you, Eric. Major Mace Mattingly and the last men on the moon. I even got the introduction written. Look up Project Horizon. It's like I went back and wrote his. It's like I had a time machine and I went back and created some history to make my little animation idea even more interesting. That's the kind of serendipitous discovery that is. Project Horizon, secret military moon base, ready in 1966. True story. Reality is always more interesting. So go out and get yourself some reality, but like everything else, in moderation. We'll see you next time.